and what made you go in, what made you interested in that continent and in the architecture that was being produced there?
I mean, you're right. I spent quite a lot of time on the African continent, let's say, pursuing two parallel research projects. One is, and also practice, one is in the field of refugee camps. I've been traveling to the Western Sahara for the last 15, 16 years. We did a national pavilion of the Western Sahara at the Venice Biennale. And the other kind of project is the architecture of the 1960s and 70s, the period of decolonization, political transformation expressed through architecture. A very kind of short summary of this. And why is always difficult. There's many reasons. One is really also coming, I was very interested in migration, in diaspora. The first kind of idea of migration came from Jewish history, studying the diaspora. And so the step maybe looks very far, but in fact maybe it's not. If you look at historic diaspora, let's look at contemporary diaspora. So what is it? It's refugees. And I thought it's something that is considered to be at the periphery of, it's usually seen as the periphery of architecture, but maybe by looking at refugee camps, we can learn something about the very, very core and heart of architecture. And again, I don't go to the refugee camps to help. I go there because they do amazing stuff architecturally. The Sahrawi refugees in the Western Sahara do amazing stuff, and I want to learn. And I want to be able to do things with them that are fascinating.
So if we take that philosophy, we investigate a little bit more. This issue about, in this case, a white male from Europe arriving in Africa to build. There would be many people today who would say this would be inappropriate. And a kind of new form of colonization. So addressing that, if someone would throw that in your lap and give the answer you just gave to me, how would you answer to that charge?
Of course, I mean, yes, I'm a white, privileged white male coming from Europe. I can't change that. But what I believe in is a little bit what I said. I want to do kind of collaborative projects where I can learn something that I could never learn elsewhere, and where also my partners can do something that they could not do without me. So we did this National Pavilion of the Western Sahara. We brought I don't need to go too much into the context. Western Sahara is occupied by Morocco. It's a sovereign country that doesn't have access to its own territory. And it's not recognized by Italy. We brought the kind of national pavilion of a country not recognized by Italy into the center of the Venice Biennale, where architecture is discussed globally, and make a claim, a political claim through architecture, and that is. And we showcase the kind of architectural production of the Sahrawi refugees as architecture with a capital A, and that's maybe something where. Of course, there is a power relationship that is uneven. I bring money, but they bring fantastic architecture and their talents, and we try to do it as fair as possible.
Yeah, so I had a little bit this issue because I was involved in the Babyn project, and we also had part of the architectural board that was the client of this project. And we also had discussions in some way, why are we here, people from the United States, Canada, Europe, various European countries, without a single Ukrainian in the architectural board, and we were going to, in some way, shape the future of this site, or help shape the future of the site, and there was discussion about when we decided to build a synagogue there, or should be a local architect, or should we just go for the very best we know? that happened to be you, especially because we didn't know that it would be such a playful project, but because of the synagogue that you had done in Mainz a decade earlier, which I think is the best synagogue constructed in the past 50 years, apart from the one in Babyn. But when you had accepted the commission and the design was there, it was in a few weeks basically. Strangely enough, we could imagine it could be built. You faced an incredible problem, and in some way we faced a problem, and the main client, Ilya, faced a big problem of how to get this thing built in a minimum of time. And I remember that I was shuttling between you and Ilya. You were in Senegal, and Ilya was either in Moscow or in Kiev or in London, where there were great, I think, doubts if this thing could actually be created it was only a few months that were given, 4 or 5 months of construction. And I just, in hindsight, it's not only that I think your design is absolutely a marvel and uplifting, and it is like a playground on that side. But I also must say that I really marvel about the incredible skills and energy and the organization that was brought to bear on this project. And I just wonder, because you talked a lot about the people who built the project in Senegal, if you could talk a little bit about the Ukrainians that were involved in this project, and in some way the dialogue and the tensions and the process of making the thing over a few months.
I will in a second. I just want to maybe add one more thing to the previous question. I find it, for me, it is extremely important to be able to operate elsewhere, because also in my biography, I don't have a kind of a local home. I don't have, we were speaking earlier, I don't have a village to go back to or a town to go back to. That is really because also kind of biography was everywhere. And I think the alternative of when we would say, no, we can't build as a European male anymore in Senegal, or as person A cannot build in country B anymore, I think that is very, very dangerous, because that turns us into very provincial, self-centered, limited people, and that is maybe, there's more danger in that than if you do a collaborative project across borders and across continents in a sensitive way, and that I think it has to be. Anyway, who was there in Ukraine was a fantastic team of engineers, craftsmen, artists, historians, researchers, I don't know, 50 people in the foundation, researching the history, researching means of representation, researching crimes, and we were building the synagogue. And of course, the we is my assumption, is how do you say, is presumptuous. I was building it. The synagogue was being built in 3 places simultaneously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we had to hit a kind of important day in the calendar of Yom HaShoah, the day of kind of remembering the Holocaust. In one place, the steel structure was being built. In another place, the wood was being constructed, and on site, the preparation for, I don't know, erecting everything was being done. So it was a crazy, incredibly intense time that only worked with this super hectic, super intense, but beautifully kind of conducted collaboration, conducted through our good friend Ilya, collaboration of many, many people working on one thing. And that was very beautiful.
So I will bring it to the room, the opportunity to ask some questions. I just want to do a little bit of testimony here. First of all, the day that we were at the commemoration was in October last year. It was an incredibly beautiful day. One of the amazing moments for me, there were two amazing moments. The first one was we were earlier on the site, and the chief rabbi of Ukraine came to the synagogue. And I had met this chief rabbi the day before in a kind of private meeting, and he had told me in his own synagogue, this is a 19th century synagogue in Kiev, how important this particular synagogue was. And he said, one of the problems of synagogues is today they're all fortresses. That when you come to a synagogue, people rightly or wrongly feel that they're being threatened, and in many jurisdictions it's rightly so. So there are police, there sometimes are Israeli security people, and it's very difficult to get in. And so there is this tension that he said the great thing about this synagogue is it's open. You open it, and you saw in the pictures, you see the people who are watching the service. There's no protection, there are no security cordons that are at least visible. And he said this synagogue, by simply being open, has more done for Jewish-Christian relations than anything I've done in the past 30 years in Ukraine. And he has all of these programs. And so then later, the next day, we were there, I think we arrived more or less at the same time, and I saw the chief rabbi taking a group of Christian priests, and these included the Patriarch of the Ukrainian Church, and the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Kiev, and there were all of these flocks of younger priests, and they were in the bima, they were in the synagogue, and I was standing a little distance. I think you were also there, and we were watching them, and they were like kids in a playground. They were pointing at things, and they were laughing, and they had joy. They had this incredible joy. And so this was such a beautiful moment, because it was indeed this idea that to bring back to Babyn Yar a sense of that playfulness that was destroyed at that site, especially between traditional antagonists, people who despised each other, who mistrusted each other, on both sides, with all of the conspiracy theories and the actual kind of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism that also was generated by the churches, was an incredibly beautiful moment. And so then when basically the cantor sang the prayer for the dead, I mean, I just broke out in tears. I was crying there. And there was this colleague of mine, and I just hugged her. I needed to hug, and I just did this with her. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't really do that. I should ask your permission. I'm in your personal space. And we're just hugging and crying together. So I really thank you for having made it possible for those 2 moments. I really think it is absolutely a building that does everything that it needs to do at that site and at that moment. So I would like to open the room to questions. Yes.
I wanted to thank you for the beautiful presentation and for the discussion. I wanted to ask, I found it really fascinating what you're talking about when you're working in Senegal with Babyn. Yes. And that sort of reciprocity that you encountered with working with him, and how it started kind of becoming a sort of local vernacular with the words. And I thought that really tied to what you were saying, like after Robert Jan asked you about learning from and bringing what you know for them to learn from together. I wanted to ask, have there been other instances in your career, working in different places, where that sort of reciprocity with local workers or designers and stuff have happened? And how has that influenced your work in the future?
Yeah, it was maybe the most intense example of this kind of collaboration. Yes, I'd like to collaborate, but I'm also, it sounds terrible, it's my office, so there is, no, I'm not an office of, I don't know, 7 partners, and then an abbreviation of 7 letters or something like this. So That shows maybe also a certain kind of hesitation, but on the other hand, I also really like to collaborate with experts, with cool people who are really fun and cheeky to work with. And Babyn was fantastic, and in Tambacounda this was maybe the most extreme, or where this kind of collaboration, which is really like a ping pong, where you get back something that you don't expect, was taken to the extreme. We've done that in other projects, but this is the most extreme, and I absolutely learned from that. No, I mean, I will never ever build a test wall again, just for the sake of just doing a test wall. That there has to be. No, I learned so much in this process, and it has really reshaped my practice also afterwards. And I want my practice to be influenced by these kinds of projects. I want the practice also to come out of the process in a different way. So I would be lying if I would say, no, this is the way I always do the projects, and I just continue in that way. But I want my practice to be kind of reshaped by the projects.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think it was beautiful, both projects that you presented, and I appreciate your approach of working with people. I want to go back to Robert's own comment about the synagogue being open, because that was one of the first things that I noticed, is that it's really open, and I feel it does welcome everyone, and that is something that I haven't seen before. I've never been to a synagogue before. And with all the security layers that you mentioned, Robert Challenge, so that makes this project with the design beauty, with the skills, with the concept. This makes this project really a must-see project. So I was wondering if you come across the concept of dark tourism, which is which is a concept of tourism where people travel to places where horrible incidents have happened, like Babyn Yard. So it really becomes a place where people go and learn, and it becomes tourism. So that concept with the building that you built, I was wondering to what extent do you see, and then with everything that you mentioned about the site being open, the picnics, and all the absurdity of the site itself, do you agree with the fact that this site should be a must-visit place in Kiev today?
I think let's say the richness of the site, this kind of many layers of activities must remain. What should not happen is that this memorial landscape starts to push out everything else. Now, I think the fact that you have picnics there, that you have kids playing volleyball and mountain biking, and for God's sake, even keep the shooting range. I think that you have all these kind of layers of activities, from the bizarre to the sad to the fun to celebration. I think is important. If the memorial landscape would start to kind of clean out everything that doesn't fit in the concept of memorialization, then I think we would have a problem. So yes, it should be a destination, absolutely, of people to visit, but it should not exclude everything else that is going on there.
Can I add a little bit to that? Because there's one particular site I have a rather intimate relationship in this, which is Auschwitz, especially Auschwitz-Birkenau. There's Auschwitz, which is a memorial camp, and it's very well controlled. There's a fence around it, and if you don't buy the ticket, so to speak, the ticket is free, but you cannot get enter. But Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is the site where the atrocity really took place, where 1 million people were murdered. that actually is an enormous site that is, and there's all kinds of traffic going through the site. So first of all, you have of course the tourists, let's call them the tourists. In somewhere, people who go there, they're not really fully tourists, because I think when something happens, even if they're part of a package tour, something happens inside and that may take 10 or 15 years for it to have an impact. But also it is a shortcut between the village of Brzezinska, Birkenau, and the train station or the bus station. So there are people, farmers, because there's a lot of, they take basically their cows to graze on the grass inside the thing. And there's a lot of informal stuff that pulls that site back into the local community, in the life of the local community. Even because there is a forest part of the site, which is a forest where 100,000 people were murdered in September 1942. This is actually a place where the people of the village go for their Sundays, to walk the dog and whatever like that. And there has been always a push and pull between people who say that this is a holy site, and it should be completely protected from those kind of secular activities. And then there were people like myself, because I was involved in creating a master plan, and said, actually for the future of the site, it's absolutely essential that these people continue to come there, because it is only by having the locals use the site that there is actually an effective stewardship of the site. They are the eyes. You know, if you put a big wall around it and you have a gate, and then you are basically dependent on paid guards to basically keep the site protected. But if the local population see that this is part of their daily life, then inside the site will be more effectively protected. And so I'm very much in favor of actually, and I think that also the foundation, the plans that were being developed, which are now on hold because of the war, very much was in favor of this site is not only about death, this is about, it's in the middle of a neighborhood, and if the people in the neighborhood don't take ownership of the site and say this is something that means something to us, not only because of the death of 35,000 Jews in 1941, but because it's a great place to be. I think otherwise we are fighting a losing battle, if you want to use the metaphor.
And I absolutely agree. And the other thing is for me, you were saying you were crying, but the day earlier the people were laughing. And I think that both is possible is incredibly important for me. That I wanted to create something where, yes, tears can flow, but the laughter of and the kind of even a moment of happiness can come back there. And because I don't know, this is maybe like a almost childish stubbornness, but I think like if the only thing we can do there is cry, then the Nazis will have always won in the end, continuously. So it's only when we start looking into the future again and also laugh and be happy that we have kind of overcome that and go beyond the act of the massacre. And this is what we have to do.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Two more questions?
I think we're out of time. It's after 8.
Maybe one guy.
One more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last question. Yeah, thank you so much for your lecture. Enjoyed hearing about the 2 different projects. I guess going back to the project in Senegal, so you talked about how, you know, you're really listening to kind of the locals and also to the building form. And so thinking about the 2 more constraints that you had in the hospital, now going on to the next extension of the staff buildings, I'm sort of wondering what sort of kind of process are you going through in order to kind of come up with a design for that?
The design for the staff building, staff housing. I should have shown it a little bit more, but we use the same bricks, surprise, and we create a kind of communal, mostly communal housing, shared housing facilities, so shared kitchen, shared living rooms, individual private bedrooms, and cells, and it's like a dense horizontal field. There's two references. One is the city of Tambacounda itself, kind of compressed. It's this kind of horizontal field of many, many cells, and actually a weaving of Annie Albers that also has this kind of dense, interwoven spaces. That was the inspiration for that. But we use the same brick, also these kind of vaults, just in an orthogonal pattern.
I think that Adrian was about to close, but I can close, or we could both close together. So thank you both, thank you Manuel for showing us these very intelligent and well-designed projects that will really be helpful for the students who are right at the end of their term, so a little bit stressed. So thanks everybody for coming out. I really think you'll agree this was very worthwhile, and we're really happy to do it.